This is Counterpoint, and I'm Tanya Allen. Venezuela has once again been plunged into a state of protest and unrest following the disputed result of the July 28, 2024 presidential election. Pro-democratic opposition, led by Edmundo Gonzalez, has claimed 73% of voting tallies. Independent exit polls point to this landslide opposition win. However, socialist incumbent government, led by President Nicolas Maduro, has claimed victory and immediately clamped down on citizen protests to what is seen as a stolen election. Remember, Venezuela has been under immense pressure from the international community to democratize and hold free and fair elections. The U.S. continues its sanctions against the country, crippling citizens who are desperate for a regime change. And one of the key figures in the pro-democracy movement is opposition leader Marina Corina Machado, who was banned from running for president by the incumbent President Maduro. Gonzalez is her surrogate, so to speak. So will this be the time for Venezuelans to finally have their cries for freedom heard? Or will those who hunger for democracy and a better way of life flee the country, as millions have already and continue to do so? Joining me now to share his insights in the election and its ramifications is Jon Hartley, a Canadian economist, researcher, and business commentator, as well as a senior fellow at the Macdonald-Laurier Institute. Jon, thank you so much. Yeah, thank you so much for coming on. We tend to focus mainly on Canadian issues, sometimes American, but really what's happening in Venezuela is something that many Canadians need to kind of be alert and understand what's happening. Why do you feel it's important that we pay attention to what happens in this Latin American nation?
Well, I think as global citizens, I think we're always interested and wanting to support the dignity and political rights and economic freedom and political freedom of people around the world. I think that's long been not just a staple of Canadian policy, but a staple of its allies around the world. It's amazing when you think back on the history of Venezuela. Venezuela was once one of the most prosperous countries in the world, one of the richest countries in the world in the mid-20th century. Certainly was the richest country in Latin America. And all that really started to change with the Bolivarian revolution that became sort of so-called Bolivarian revolution, which began in the late 1990s, with the rise of Hugo Chavez and effectively the state control, state takeover of the economy under what amounted to a dictatorial regime, even though Hugo Chavez was first democratically elected. And over time, it's become increasingly worse. So what's happened, over the past 10 years is we had a period of hyperinflation with the seriously impoverished the nation and in part, caused many Venezuelans to flee for neighboring countries like Colombia. Since the country's pretty much come closer to dollarizing, to adopting the U.S. dollar, that's sort of unofficial currency. So some of its hyperinflation issues have subsided, but issues of simple things like food. There's been mass issues of starvation, and that's been a big part of why so many Venezuelans have left.
Right.
The U.S. has had essentially a refugee policy with Venezuelan political refugees for quite some time as well. And so what's happened, especially in recent years, Hugo Chavez passed in the early 2010s, and since Maduro, his successor, is increasingly doubled down on statism and dictatorial control. About 4 years ago, if you can remember, there was a Venezuelan presidential election, and following that contested election, many thought that certainly in the West, many countries, the U.S., Canada, recognize Juan Guaido as their rightfully duly elected leader, and then since then, Maduro continued to keep his grasp on the country. The U.S. imposed OPEC sanctions on companies like the state-owned oil company, PDVSA. So, if you're a U.S. bond trader, you couldn't trade PDVSA bonds.
John, I'm going to pause
that's
you
a new
there.
issue.
We have to cut to commercial, but I want to pick up this discussion in just a moment.